Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic peeps to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, yeah, we talk about everything from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, but plenty of stuff in between, including books. And today, yeah, it's another book-themed video. I haven't really been doing many other themed videos lately, but I do every now and then. That is why I have that intro specifying so. But this time, it's a book-themed video, and it is my January wrap-up. So stay right where you are. You might want to grab a snack because this might be a little bit long. I did read 11 books in January, and we will talk about those books once we get back from the short intro. Welcome back, guys. Okay, I might look off to my computer because I do have my reading spreadsheet up, so it gives me a whole bunch of stats and it lets me know not to forget a book, to talk about a book. As I said in the intro, I did read 11 books in January, and it was a stellar frickin' month. I will talk about some of the specifics in a second in terms of star ratings, but just so you know, I had an average rating of 4.5 stars in January. That's pretty darn high. I, as I said, read 11 books. I read 3,888 pages. I listened to approximately 1578 minutes of audio. Now, that's not in addition to the pages read in terms of some of the books I read, I listened to audio and read along. So, in January, I had 5 freaking 5-star reads, 3 4.5-star reads, 1 4-star read, and 2 3.5-star reads. So, everything was pretty darn amazing in January, just to tell you. Alright, so let's start at the beginning. The first book I read in 2023 was Pen Pal by Dathan Auerbach, and I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but this was the first time I ever read anything by this author, heard fantastic things about this book. Gotta say, I didn't love it as much as everyone else. I'm all up for an ambiguous type of ending, but something with this ending did not sit right with me. It's not that it was ambiguous, that's not it. And I'm not giving anything away by saying that. There was just something off about the way it ended, and I can't put my finger on it. I thought it wrapped up a little too weirdly in some ways. So yeah, I wasn't enthralled with the way it ended, but there were creepy moments throughout it. It was a quick read. I think I read it in a sitting, maybe 2 sittings at most, and I gave this a 4-star rating. Decent, but not my favorite read, and I didn't love it as much as like everyone else who I've ever heard talk about this really raves about it, and I just didn't feel the same passion about it as they did. Essentially, we've got this little boy. He keeps writing to a pen pal for a class project. Doesn't think he gets an answer back, but I think the pen pal was paying closer attention than the kid ever realized, and that has consequences that last years and years. The next book I read was a book by Robert McCammon, my favorite author, and that is The Wolf's Hour. The Wolf's Hour follows our main character, Michael Gatlin, and he is basically like a military special agent. He can get things done, and he's working with the Allies during World War II against the freaking evil Nazis and their cohorts. So, working with, again, the Americans, the British, to try to bring down the freaking Nazis and shit. That's like a very light way of putting it. So not only is he a special agent, but also he can turn into a freaking wolf. How crazy is that? But the cool thing about this book is that, you know, lots of people have done wolf stories and werewolf type of stories. This was such a different take on a werewolf type of trope. And I wouldn't even call Michael the standard type of werewolf you see in a lot of books, you know, that are werewolf books, exactly. This is not exactly that. Also, it actually was quite poignant at times when it took a look at concentration camps, and there was like a scene in one, and, you know, they were looking at everyone. It was basically like a look at the Holocaust through Robert McCammon's eyes, and the way he wrote it was so sympathetic, so heart-wrenching. It was really, really well done, and very respectful, too, because it made you really feel, and it was very hard to read in terms of you can imagine the horrors and just the despair that must have been going on in these camps. So I thought that was a really powerful set of scenes in the book that took place in that camp. Hard to read, but well done in my opinion. And like I said, the wolf stuff was very well done too. Almost perfect. There was just some cheesy romance stuff that I didn't absolutely love that could have probably been cut out and nothing would have been lost. So to me, that's the only reason it's not a 5-star. I gave it a 4.5 star. Still super enjoyable, still super underrated, still very unique for being a werewolf story, but again, I don't really consider it a true werewolf story in that the wolf part of it is very, very different from anything I've ever read, you know, that could be compared to this. So I loved it. Next up, I read Witch by Christopher Pike, and one of my goals this year is to read more Christopher Pike, but I gotta say, I was pretty disappointed with Witch, and I feel bad because my friend Elizabeth from Elizabeth Sagewood, the YouTube channel, and my friend Katrina from Katrina Brown, the YouTube channel, freaking both love Witch, and I didn't like it. There was something about the characters I couldn't connect to any of them. Even the main girl, who was kind of witchy, hence the title of the book, I didn't like her. So she could basically see things that are going to happen, and then she tries to prevent some things that are going to happen, and it kind of works out pretty badly for her. You can't really escape fate, essentially, and destiny. It kind of seems like what it's telling you. There were some cool moments. I didn't like it as much as my 2 other books that I've really liked more than this by Christopher Pike, which would be Monster as well as The Midnight Club. Both very different from Witch, in my opinion. So yeah, I thought it was okay. I gave it a 3.5 star rating. Christopher Pike's books are pretty easy to read, but this one felt kind of long and hard to get through. But again, don't just take my word for it. I always advise people, you know, always check out a book, no matter what I think of it. Check it out and see what you think for yourself. You know, people like Katrina, who has great taste. People like Elizabeth also has great taste, and they both liked it, so you might like it too. Don't just take my word for it. Next up, I read No Exit by Taylor Adams. I don't really like this cover. I wish I had a better edition of this, but it is what it is. This was so fast-paced, I read it in one night, and I loved it. Lots of twists and turns, compelling as hell, action-packed, 5 stars. Not much to say about it. This girl is stuck at this rest stop because the snow, there's a big storm, and she sees a little girl in a cage in the backseat of a car. And I don't think you should know anything else when you go into this read, because shit goes to hell, and it's really entertaining and interesting, and I had a great time reading it. Next up, a reread. I reread Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I first read this about 2 or so years ago, actually 3 years ago now, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing. This time around, I used the audiobook, which was really awesome, and I read this again to prepare for Hellbent, the sequel that just came out not too long ago. I still have not read the sequel, even though I meant to when it came out in January, but it's February now, and I still haven't read it. However, I'm glad to have a refresher on the story and the characters, and it was just as enjoyable as the first time. Lots of occult elements. We're following this girl named Alex, and she freaking is a really well-developed, multifaceted, very strong character. She's had trauma in her past, but that's one of the reasons I like her, is because she lived through the trauma and she came out stronger on the other side. She's just somebody I would love to be friends with because she's just kind of a badass, even though she doubts herself all the time in the story. Anyway, she gets a full ride to Yale because she could see ghosts, and there are all these secret societies at Yale, and part of it entails people taking potions to be able to see ghosts so they can control like these supernatural forces and still perform magic. Alex doesn't have to take the potion, she could just see them. Hence why Yale is so interested to have her come to the school, give her a full ride, and kind of work with the magical, you know, houses. I loved it, and the first time it was a 5 star, still a 5 star. Next up, I read Nelfs by Sydney Williams, and this was fantastic. I gave this a 4.5 star rating. So entertaining. We've got this little girl, Heaven. She could see these cartoon characters that are supposed to be just cute little things that kind of are like Smurfs, but, you know, a make-believe version of Smurfs. Are called Nelfs in this story, and the Nelfs start to come to life, and instead of being sweet cartoon characters, they're mean, and there's more going on than meets the eye. There's a big mystery at the core. Why are these, you know, fake cartoon characters coming to life and bothering Heaven and able to physically hurt her? Is there some occult stuff going down? It was fantastic. The audio is hilarious. I talked about it in a vlog, a Paperback from Hell vlog. If you missed it, I'll link it below. I'm very proud of that vlog. It was fun. I had a blast. Another book I talked about in that vlog, but it's not a vintage book, I just happened to have read it during the vlog, is Gone to See the River Man. I also have a spoiler filled review with my friend Lexi. We discussed this, and a whole bunch of people were in the chat. Lots of people have very different opinions on this. Lots of people didn't like it. Lots of people thought it was meh. Other people loved it. I fell on the it was okay, but mostly meh for me side of the coin. This is by Christopher Triana. It was my first book by him. This is considered an extreme horror. There are some extreme things. There's definitely some things that could be triggering for people, so I would look up content warnings if you're interested. I don't know. At first I gave it a 4, but then I lowered my rating to a 3.5. And sometimes thinking back about this, I might even want to lower it again to a 3. I know other people loved it, which I'm so happy that some people really, really enjoyed it. It just, nothing really stuck out about this, very much to me. Essentially, we've got Lori, who's a terrible person. She's obsessed with this serial killer, and she's writing to him while he's in prison. And the guy named Edmund Cox, he asks her, oh, I need you to go bring this thing to the Riverman. So she has to go take her sister and go travel to see the Riverman, and it's not an easy journey. Stuff develops, and it goes from there. That's all I'll say. Not for everyone. Jackson's making all kinds of noise, so I'm sorry about that. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, again, check out the vlog. Or, if you want spoilers and you've already read it, check out my book club chat with my friend Lexi over from the channel Books with Lexi. Make sure to check out her channel as well. I will link her below. She is fantastic. Another book I talked about in that same vlog, Stitch. I was reading this book throughout the vlog. I buddy read this with my friend Alex over at the channel The Bookubus. Check out her channel. She will also be linked below. Stitch is fantastic. One of my favorite reads of the year so far. 5 stars. Mark Morris. I just did a book haul of a whole bunch of new Mark Morris books that I bought. They're not new in the sense that they're newly released. They're new as in I just acquired them. I newly acquired them, I should say. So yes, I loved Mark Morris's book Toady last year when I read it with Alex. We buddy read that as well. And this year, I love Stitch. So Mark Morris, yes, I cannot wait to dig into more of his work. And I did see a comment that Alex recently left on my Mark Morris haul that she would love to buddy read another one of his books with me, and I'd love to. You know I'm always up for buddy reading together, Alex, especially a Mark Morris book. It feels like we should read every Mark Morris book together since it's like now a tradition, apparently. Since the only 2 books we've read by him, we've both buddy read together. I just think it would be fun. I've already said what this is about multiple times on my channel recently, but I'll give you a quick idea. This guy, Dan, at university, he comes in contact with a guy named Stitch. Well, Stitch kind of changes Dan, and all of a sudden, after meeting Stitch, Dan becomes charismatic, and he ends up starting a club at university called The Crack. The Crack seems more like a cult, though, and as new members attend the first meeting, they leave, and they're not really like they used to be. They're changed. And all their friends who weren't at the meeting notice this change and are like, what the hell is going on? We need to investigate this. But one person who was at the meeting was not affected by Dan's charisma, was not drawn in to his whole idea of what he was presenting in The Crack. She was not put under his spell. So she's kind of, she's egging on everybody else, or all of her friends at the university, to be like, we need to check this out. Something's not right here. And a lot of things develop, a lot more than what I just described. It's really hard to describe this book because there's so much going on and so many characters. I couldn't possibly tell you everything, and you wouldn't want to know everything. I just think it's fantastic. Some of the best horror imagery I've ever read. Totally deserves the 5 stars I gave it. So happy I read another Mark Morris book and that I loved it just as much as Toady. Next up, I read How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, the new Grady Hendrix book that came out in January. Loved it, 5 stars. I know it's not 5 stars for everybody, but for me, I just think it's so easy to rate a Grady Hendrix book, even though it might not be my favorite Grady Hendrix, which it's not. It's so easy to rate one of his books 5 stars just because the writing's so easy to digest. His humor is there. It comes across on the page so well. I just think he's fantastic. And to me, if you read Paperbacks from Hell, or if you go and look up any of his articles where he recommends some of his favorite old school books, he a lot of times will call out the book Toy Cemetery by William W. Johnstone. Now, from the title, you might guess that there's some things to do with toys and dolls in that book, and you'd be right. But not as much as you'd think, though. From a book that has a toy on the cover and is called Toy Cemetery, I really wanted more toys from that book. And I do have a reading vlog, my first ever reading vlog, when I read Toy Cemetery, and I'll link that down below in case you want to see it. I thought the book was wild. It's batshit crazy. It's poorly written. I feel like Grady Hendrix's book, How to Sell a Haunted House, is a really, really awesome, better version of Toy Cemetery. It almost feels like an homage in a way, in terms of the plot's a little crazy, but it's got better characters than Toy Cemetery. It's got a plot that actually makes sense, and it's got more toys and dolls. And that's not really a spoiler. There's a little stamp that Grady Hendrix has been using when he signs people's books. There are copies of How to Sell a Haunted House, and it's like a doll, and there's like, you know, a doll talked about on the back cover. So yes, it's a haunted house story mixed with kind of like creepy dolls, and I just feel like, in a way, there's some aspects of this book that makes me think it was like his homage to Toy Cemetery, but doing it in his way, and doing Toy Cemetery but better. Toy Cemetery but not batshit crazy. Toy Cemetery but like actually good and well written. So that's just my take on it. You guys might disagree if you've read both and you're like, well, how are you getting that comparison? It's just something that I've thought of because I know Grady Hendrix like really talks about how entertaining and how intriguing, and even though it's bad, it's technically so bad it's good when he talks about Toy Cemetery. So to me, it just feels like it was like his ode to that in a way. And that could just be me saying that. Again, not my favorite Grady Hendrix. My favorite's still My Best Friend's Exorcism. That one will probably always be my favorite Grady Hendrix book because it was the very first one I ever read by him. And it's just fantastic. Lots of emotion. It made me cry. How to Sell a Haunted House, same thing. It's got emotion, great character development, his signature humor, as I mentioned. It's got a lot of good things going for it. This woman has to go back after her parents die, and her and her brother have to settle their parents' estate, and things seem amiss with the house. Is it haunted? What's going on? We learn a little bit more about what's going down with the house and such. Next up, I read Pin from my friend Kelly's book club. Her book club is the From Hell book club. You could find Kelly on Instagram and on YouTube at Kelly Hooked on Books. I love her book club. I try to participate every single month, and I have a lot of fun because I love reading vintage horror. So Pin, I also put that as part of the vlog, the reading vintage horror vlog, and we're essentially following this brother and sister who have a very weird relationship. It seems like they're a lot closer than a brother and sister should be, and they form a very unhealthy, weird, strange attachment to this anatomically correct doll named Pin, and they talk back and forth to Pin, and stuff develops. I don't want to give anything away, but I freaking loved it. I loved it. It was a 4.5 star read? Yes, it was a 4.5 star read for me. I had to double check because for a while I was almost contemplating giving it a 5 because I really thought it was strange and off-putting and creepy and disturbing, honestly. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Very intriguing. A lot of psychological stuff in the book. A lot of gross relationship stuff in the book too, but I think that added to the creepiness. So I enjoyed it overall. Definitely a good vintage read, one of the better paperbacks from hell that I've read. Alright, and last but not least, I read this for my friend Amy's book club. You could find Amy, by the way, on YouTube at the channel Amy McCaw. She is an author. She wrote Mina and the Undead. She also wrote the sequel, Mina and the Slayers, and I had a book club chat with her along with my friend Elizabeth from Elizabeth Sagewood and Katrina from the channel Katrina Brown. We all talked about Frozen Charlotte, which was my very last read of January. Frozen Charlotte is written by Alex Bell, and it's the first book I've read by Alex Bell, and it was fantastic. It's technically a YA book, but it's so dark. It is so freaking dark. I gotta repeat it because it really, really goes there. Great imagery, creepy dolls, someone dies and there's like a mystery around it, a creepy family, creepy little girl, lots of awesome stuff going down, creepy schoolhouse, lots of creepiness in general. Fantastic. If you like winter horror, this has some cold winter vibes. If you like creepy doll horror, it has that too, as I mentioned. I just really thought it was a well-written book, especially one that was geared towards a YA audience. I don't think it held back. I don't think it talked down to the reader. It was very, very surprising how much I loved this book, and I gave it 5 stars. That's how much I liked it. Very, very well written. Super quick read. Very, very fast-paced in terms of it was a page turner for me. I just kept wanting to see what was going to happen next. I wanted to solve the mystery. So what a way to end my month of reading with such a high note with Frozen Charlotte. But yeah, I started the month with a decent note with Pen Pal. It wasn't my favorite read, but then I ended on like this awesome high note, and I had a lot of great highlights in between between the beginning and the end of the month. So 11 books total, over 3,000 pages. I'm very satisfied with my month of reading. What did you guys read in January? Have you read any of the books that I checked out and read in January? Let me know below what you think. But for this time, guys, that is it for me. Thanks so much for joining me. You guys know I appreciate your time. Until next time, guys, you know what you can do. Keep on killing it. Bye, guys.